Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Ball Profits. This is our Week 9 start sit video, plus we're going to have some other information here. We're going to talk about the trade today, how that impacts fantasy. Now, before we get into the video, many of you know we've watched the videos before, you know we say, but it's important that you contextualize this information. Every league is so different. Scoring system, bench depth, waiver wire availability, all these things. So you need to take the information. You're going to have to flex a little bit into your league. If you have specific questions, we'd be happy to answer them. You put them at the bottom. We try to get to them in a timely manner. The other thing that we always say is someone would ask, well, why are you doing a start sit video on Tuesday? So much information can change, and that's true. That's why it's important. No matter when we put the video out, you need to always follow constantly changing information. A prime example is Josh Gordon. Heading into Monday night's game, report came out that he was going to miss some series because of disciplinary reasons. So yes, information can always change, but it doesn't matter when we did the video. We could do it Friday, Saturday, even Sunday morning, and an hour later information would change. So we're going to give you information. Friday we do a daily fantasy video, and in there we give you updates. So if something has changed in waiver wire or something regarding start sit, you'll get that information. So watch that. Let's talk about today's trades. So today's trades, Demaryius Thomas goes to the Texans. So what's going to happen? How does that affect each person's value there? So I'll look at Kiki QT in that one there. I think a lot of people, myself included, liked him. Will Fuller is going to be out for the year, torn ACL. He looked like the next guy up when he was going to come back from his hamstring injury. He was going to be huge. His value does take a hit with Demaryius Thomas there now. What I would expect is when he does come back that his workload is going to be similar to the way it was back when both him and Fuller were on the field together. Now for Thomas, I actually like this move for Thomas. I think it's going to help his fantasy value. It's going to take a week or two, I think, for him and Watson to really build rapport, to him become familiar with the playbook. But once he does, I think there's a boost in his value. Going from Case Keenum to Deshaun Watson is a huge boost for you. And so I think in a lot of weekly matchups, a week or two from now, he'll be a wide receiver 3 that you could play. But for me here, the real shift in this trade, the real fantasy value comes in Courtland Sutton, the wide receiver for Denver. He's a must-add in all leagues. 87% available out there. Now, he's a former first-round pick. He's big, 6'4", physical. He's made some nice catches this year, made some nice plays, and really what he needed was opportunity. Well, that opportunity is now, and I think a lot of weeks he's a guy that you can safely start also as a wide receiver 3 based on matchup. I like Courtland Sutton's value now that Thomas is no longer there. Then you have Golden Tate to the Eagles. So I look at Golden Tate's numbers going from Detroit to Philadelphia there. I don't think his numbers are going to change a whole lot. I think the biggest boost is going to be for Carson Wentz, who now adds himself another solid slot receiver to go there. And Carson Wentz has been playing really good and quietly. People forget, I think we live in a nation, or we live in a culture where we're always, what have you done for me lately? We want the newest thing. It was just a year ago before he tore his ACL that this guy was poised to win the MVP. He's looking really good. Now, he adds a very good wide receiver to that mix. I think that Carson Wentz in a lot of weekly matchups is going to start to be a 5 or 6 quarterback start weekly moving forward. Another huge boost in this trade here is Marvin Jones. So if you're a Marvin Jones owner and you were patient, especially you had some really bad weeks there, his production was falling, his targets were following, well, congratulations. Last week he had a good week, and now Golden Tate leaving means he's going to get increased targets, and he's going to clearly become the number either wide receiver 1 or 2 between him and Kenny Golladay there. And so I really like that there. He's only 20% available though, Marvin Jones, so probably not somebody you can pick up, but maybe he is available. And then Ty Montgomery got traded to the Ravens. So I think his role is going to be similar to was in Green Bay. He'll get some carries. He'll be involved a little bit in the passing game, but nothing significant that you can use in fantasy. He's not going to be ahead of Brown or Crabtree as wide receivers, so I just think his role will be very similar, not something that you can use. And I have to wonder if that trade is falling to the fact that he fumbled on that last kickoff when Green Bay was going to get the ball back against the Rams, having an opportunity to take the lead there. And he was told by coaching staff to take a knee and not return the kick, and he did. So I think that's got to be it. And then the other 2 guys that were traded is Clinton Dix, the defensive back for the Packers, goes to Washington. And then I think about Dante Fowler going to the Rams. Well, both of those guys are going to defenses that were already good. That's just improved, added much depth. So I think Washington and the Rams just got better on defense there. So those are some of the trades today. That's some of the fantasy impact. Let's get to our first week. Let's look at Oakland and San Francisco. Let's get Derek Carr in this one. So he's versus San Francisco, who's getting the 7th most points to quarterbacks. Now, Carr has been confusing this year. It's really hard to trust this guy. Against Cleveland and Indianapolis, he had really good games. 7 touchdown passes, and he added a rushing touchdown. The other 5 games, he's been brutal. In the other 5 games, he only had 3 touchdown passes total to 6 interceptions. Another concern I have in this game for starting Derek Carr, even though the matchup looks favorable for him, is the games that he did well, Derek Carr, he was forced to have to throw the ball a lot. They were playing from behind. So the question is, do you think San Francisco is going to light it up, put a lot of points on the board, and force him to have to throw a lot? I don't think so. And so, yeah, San Francisco lineup, the offense there is going to do better against the Raiders, but they're not a great offense, and so I have concerns. Well, here's the thing. There's 6 teams on a bye this week, and so for a lot of you out there, you're in a pinch. There's not a lot, especially for a very large league, 16-team or bigger, and there are leagues out there like that. You're going to be forced to pick up Derek Carr and start him. If you have to do that, his matchup is good, but it's not a great matchup for him, so start him, but have lower expectations. Let's look at C.J. Beathard, quarterback for San Francisco. First 3 games this season he started, he looked decent. He had 2 touchdown passes in those games. On the last 2 he struggled, but it was against the Rams and Cards, and they're both tough against the pass. Now he faces Oakland defense, allowing the 10th most points to quarterbacks. I would say I wouldn't start him unless you're in deep leagues and you need somebody for a bye, or you're in 2 quarterback leagues out there. Then he's somebody, once again, that is an okay matchup, but he's got maybe a decent floor, but he's got a very low ceiling there. Let's talk about the running backs in this one. Let's look at Matt Breida versus Oakland. Oakland's getting the 12th most points to running backs. Now, he's only averaging 42.6 rushing yards per game in the last 5. He's a smaller back. He's very banged up. He's injured week to week. He's missing practice. People don't know if he's going to play. Now, add on to that, he's playing on a short week. And so if he ends up playing, and I assume that he probably will, I think the coaching staff is going to limit his carries, and that Morris and Raheem are going to get carries there. Also, what's concerning, I think, is his strength is in the passing game. He's got good hands. He's very quick, and he hasn't caught a pass in 3 weeks. So he's a guy that personally I'd prefer to sit, but for some of you out there, you're going to have a hard time sitting him, and so you're going to have to start him. But if you do, I'm going to say that he's a guy that is going to fall down into that kind of running back 3 range this week. Then there's Alfred Morris and Raheem Mostert. So after 2 good games, right, Raheem looked like he was trending upwards. Okay, he was a good fit for the offense. All of a sudden, his touches dropped last week. And it's getting very hard to predict the touches on this team and what's happening there with Shanahan and what he's doing. Let's go back to Alfred Morris. So he had double-digit carries 4 out of 5 weeks. Everybody was predicting that his role was going to increase. Breida was beat up there. Even the beloved Matthew Berry said he started him 1 week based on that information, right? Then all of a sudden, out of the blue, after Morris had looked really good, Shanahan goes ahead and doesn't give any carries in week 6. So just surprises everybody. Double-digit carries. Boom, doesn't get 1 carry in week 6. Then Raheem gets the ball the next 2 weeks, and he looks good. Looks like he's a much better fit in that offense. And so Raheem becomes on the radar of all the fantasy world. He's clearly a better fit. He's doing good. Then suddenly last week, all of a sudden, his carries drop, and Morris gets more touches. So it's getting really hard to predict who that backup is going to be that you can trust. I would say this. I wouldn't trust any of them unless Breida happens to be out. And if he happens to be out, my money would be on Raheem. That's who I would start. So we'll have to watch and see Thursday, the injury report there. Also, there's Jalen Richard. Playing San Francisco, given the 7th most points to running backs, he has PPR value. In fact, his value is high in PPR leagues. Getting a little boost with Lynch out. Now, last week he had 8 catches for 50 yards. On the year, he's got 39 catches, on pace for 89 catches. I don't think that number is going to drop. They don't have a clear number 1 wide receiver. Their defense is bad. They need to throw a lot there. I like him in PPR leagues. I would start in flex and PPRs as a running back 2 in leagues over 12 teams. So that's kind of where I would land with him. Then there's Doug Martin. So in his career, he's been all or nothing. He's had 2 really good seasons, and the other seasons he's really struggled. He's been very disappointing. But with so many fantasy teams struggling to find a starting running back, you're going to have to look his way, a number of you. And so I think you need to consider him. Last week he came out, he had a good week. 13 carries, 72 yards, added 2 catches for 17 yards. Nice game. So I would start him as a low-end running back 2 in large leagues. It would be nice if you could afford to see 1 more week out of the guy to find out if he's truly back or not. As far as wide receivers go, let's look at Goodwin. He's really an all-or-nothing wide receiver out there. Last game, he had 1 catch, a 55-yard touchdown. He does have 4 TDs on here. That's good. He had 1 game with 126 yards, but other than that, his yardage totals have been 30, 24, 55, and 24. Not great. Now, he is playing Oakland. That allows the 9th most points to wide receivers, but with Jimmy out there, Jimmy Garoppolo not playing, I would sit him. I would sell other wide receivers for San Francisco. And then Oakland. You got Jordy Nelson, Brandon LaFell, Martavis Bryant. None is a clear number 1 wide receiver there. None of them is getting the usage or targets that are consistent enough to be trusted. I would sit all those guys. One of them may rise to the surface, may have a good week, but who's that going to be? You're rolling the dice to play any of them. I would sit them. As far as tight ends go, you got Jared Cook. He's got a good matchup versus San Francisco. He's had a decent season. I think that's going to continue, especially now that Amari Cooper's gone there and they lack quality wide receiver options, so I would start him. And you have George Kittle. George Kittle is the most consistent pass catcher for San Francisco. He's becoming one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Versus Oakland, giving up the 8th most points to tight end. He is a stud. You need to start George Kittle. Gould can be started. He's not bad. He's not a great fit, but you could play him. And I would sit Daniel Carlson. I would sit Oakland's defense, and you could start San Francisco as a very, very low-end play. They're probably a better look elsewhere, though. Let's go to the Bears versus the Bills. So look at Mitch Trubisky playing the Bills, allowing the 19th fewest points to quarterbacks. In this game, I see a lower scoring game. I don't think the over-under is going to be very high in it. I think I see a defensive battle there. You look at the Bills' offense; they're bad. And we saw a Bears team last week versus the Jets. I was really content. They put their foot off the gas there a little bit. They didn't feel the need to press the ball downfield. I think the same thing is going to happen this week. Also, that game is in Buffalo. So there's a lot of reason not to feel good about Mitch Trubisky this week. Now, he's played better and better each week, and he's become what I call a viable, quality quarterback option. But this week, I think it's better to avoid him. If you can sit Mitch Trubisky, I would encourage you to do that. As far as Buffalo quarterbacks go, you got Derek Anderson, Josh Allen, Peterman. Does it really matter who's going to play there? That Bears defense is very good. They'll have Khalil Mack most likely back this week. I would sit them. As far as running backs go, you got Jordan Howard. So the Bills allow the 10th most points to running backs. Now, what's concerning, if you look at Nagy's offense, running backs have to be effective in the passing game, and Howard's had 1 catch the last 4 games. That's not a good sign. Now, he has had back-to-back weeks where he's had touchdowns, but his 3.5 yards per carry in the year are very concerning. They're a career low. I would start in standard leagues as a running back 2/3 based on league size, and in PPR leagues, I think you need to sit Jordan Howard. Tariq Cohen. This guy's taken off. He's had 4 TDs 4 weeks in a row. During those same 4 weeks, he's added 23 catches for 350 yards. And then he also had a handful of carries that he had. He's a must-start in PPR leagues as a solid running back 2 or flex play. He has less value in standards. I would say in standard leagues, his value drops probably about 10 to 12 running back spots. LaShawn McCoy. Last week, he got shut down by a Patriots defense that's not great. And now he faces a Bear defense that allows the 5th fewest points to running backs there. I would sit him in standard leagues, although you can start him in PPR leagues as a running back 3 or flex. And here's why you can do that. He's got good hands. He's very active in the passing game. We saw that last game as he had 6 catches for 82 yards. So sit him in standards. You could start him as a flex. He's about a running back 3 in PPR leagues there. As far as wide receivers go, I would sit all the Bills wide receivers. They're not good. The quarterback is not good, and the Bears defense is good. So just sit them all. As far as Allen Robinson go, he's been banged up lately. He's been a disappointment. They brought him in to be the #1 wide receiver, and he just hasn't been that good. I would sit him. There's Taylor Gabriel. Taylor Gabriel has been probably the most consistent wide receiver in that offense there, playing the Bills that allow the 4th fewest points to wide receivers. This game, I think, is going to be potentially lower scoring. And I think if you realize Mitch Trubisky he likes to use Burton, Tariq Cohen, uses his legs quite a bit. So I just don't see enough volume there to really trust him. So I think if you could afford to sit Taylor Gabriel, you should this week. As far as tight ends go, Trey Burton. Got 4 TDs on the year. He's had 2 games where he's had nice yardage totals. Now he faces the Bills, getting the 9th fewest points to tight ends. It would be good to sit Burton, but I know that position, tight end, is very thin. So a lot of you are going to have to start him. And if you do, just start him, but know that he's probably going to have a lower production week. I would sit Clay. As far as kickers go, sit both kickers. Start the Bears defense. And the Bills defense is not a bad play if you're desperate. Chiefs versus the Browns. Pat Mahomes, do I need to tell you to start this guy? Man, this guy is crazy good. Now, the Browns are good on defense, but it doesn't matter. This guy is as close as it gets to matchup proof. You need to start Pat Mahomes. He's leading all quarterbacks in quarterback scoring. Okay, he's only played in 8 games, but in 8 games, he's had 4 games, 4 touchdowns, and 1 game with 6. This guy's phenomenal. Start him. Baker Mayfield. So Baker Mayfield's played in Kansas City, giving up the 6th most points to quarterbacks. Now, we know in this game that most likely the Browns are going to be playing from behind. They're going to be playing catch-up, and Baker Mayfield's going to need to throw the ball a lot. So for that reason, I think that Mayfield's not a great option, but I think is a good volume play. Now, the one concern I have with starting Baker Mayfield, one, he's a rookie, and the Kansas City defense has been playing better and better the last couple of weeks. They're getting more pressure on the quarterback. So I look at Baker Mayfield. I actually like him better in daily fantasies because he's very cheap. In regular fantasy, I think they're probably better options. I need to stream. One of my quarterback is on a bye this week, and so I'll need to stream somebody. I looked at Baker Mayfield, but I'm going to look elsewhere. As far as running backs go, Nick Chubb had a tough week last week. Pittsburgh is good against the run. Now he plays as Kansas City, give him the 3rd most points to running backs there. Last 2 games, Chubb has had 18 carries. They're going to rely heavily on him. You know that the Browns don't want to get into a shootout. So I think whenever they can, they're going to try to run the ball quite a bit. I like him this week as a running back too. That brings me to Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson hasn't had his best years. But he can have nice games in PPR leagues. He's got good hands. If you look at the last couple of years, I think he's averaged around 60 catches per year, last 3 years, something like that. He hasn't had consistent touches. But I think this week they're going to be playing from behind, and Kansas City actually gives up a lot of catches to running backs coming out of the backfield, running backs that are active in the passing game. So I think he's a guy that's worth a flyer if you're desperate in PPR leagues as a flex play in leagues that are larger. So Kareem Hunt started as a running back 1. He became early in the season, it looked like he was going to be a touchdown-reliant running back. His yards per carry weren't great. He didn't look very effective. He was getting the end zone, mostly byproduct of that offense. But lately, that yardage has picked up. He's very active in the passing game. The yards per carry on the rise. This guy is a stud. Start him as a running back 1 there. Start Kareem Hunt. He's solid. So at wide receivers go, you got Jarvis Landry. So in 7 of 8 games, he's had double-digit targets. That's great. Now he's versus Kansas City. We've been kind of a broken record when we talk about these sort of matchups. And basically what it comes down to is Jarvis Landry hasn't had a great year, but it's a game, like we've said very often, they're going to have to throw the ball a lot and play from behind. For that reason, he's a guy they think you need to start as a wide receiver 2 in PPR leagues and a wide receiver 3 in standards. He's going to get a lot of volume and a lot of targets. And you have Callaway, Higgins, whatever other wide receivers you may want to look at for the Browns there. There's some skill there. There's been some decent games, but there's no other Browns wide receiver that I think you can trust. None of them are getting enough volume, and so I would sit them until something changes there. As far as Tyreek Hill goes, so he injured himself last game, and Chiefs coach Andy Reid said Tyreek Hill suffered a groin injury in Week 8 against the Browns, so we need to monitor that. So he's playing the Browns, allowed the 9th points to wide receivers. That would be a good matchup. It'd be great to play Hill. He's having a very good season. Now, what I assume is going to happen, I think they're going to sit Hill this week, and I don't know. We'll have to watch the injury reports and see what comes out there. But they can beat the Browns without Hill. So why would you risk re-injuring or aggravating that injury for one of your top players when they've got enough weapons there to beat them? If he does play, though, if it comes out towards the weekend, it looks like he's going to play, I would say he's a wide receiver 3. I lower his value simply due to the injury concern. Sammy Watson started as a wide receiver 2 this week. He's been hot or cold due to inconsistent targets, but assuming Hill's going to miss time there, his target's going to go up through the roof. Last game, he had a nice game, 8 catches, 170 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I like Sammy Watson in this one, or Sammy Watkins in this one, I should say. Let's look at the tight ends, David Njoku. So David Njoku, he had a good matchup last week, and he laid an 8, got a 0. Before that, the previous 4 games, he was really good. Now he's playing Kansas City, who gives the 4th most points at tight ends. And I know that a lot of people are going to be scared because they started him last week and it didn't work out. There's only a couple tight ends in the league that week in and week out that you can say are locks to produce. And that's why if you're in a league that you have to have a tight end, you draft tight ends early. A guy like David Njoku, you have to forget last week. It's unfortunate he got a 0. With that said, he's still a good tight end. He's got a great matchup, and they're going to need to throw a lot. You need to start David Njoku in this one. And Travis Kelce, he's the best tight end football star right now. Kickers go, I would start Butker. I would sit Joseph. I would start Kansas City's defense that's been playing better as of late, and I would sit the Browns defense. Look at the Jets and the Dolphins. Look at Sam Darnold. Miami loves the 5th fewest points to quarterbacks. You look at Powell's out, one of his weapons there. The wide receivers are not great. In fact, a lot of those wide receivers are banged up and injured. He is a rookie. There's a lot of things working against him in this one. He's a guy that you need to sit. Let's look at Brock Osweiler. The Jets defense is not great, but they're decent. Now, in 3 games that he's played this year, and we're going to break down his numbers, he had 1 game that was good. He had 1 game that was decent, and last game he was below average. And so a lot of people get enamored with the first game that he came out, and he had a great game there. But if you pull back and look at his entire career, he's just simply not been a good quarterback there. I don't trust him. I would sit this guy. Let's look at Frank Gore. So 5 weeks, he's had double-digit carries. And he's playing really well if you consider this guy's 35 years old, but he's really touchdown dependent at this point, so I'd sit him. Then you got Kenyon Drake. 4 weeks in a row, this guy has looked explosive. He's had 4 touchdowns during that stretch. His yards per carry are shooting up. He's using the passing situation a lot. During that same 4-game stretch, he's had 17 catches. The coach said going into this week that they're going to reevaluate what is working on offense and what is not working. Well, I'll tell you what is working. Kenyon Drake, he needs to get more touches, and I think he's going to get more touches. I think his production is going to continue to rise. You need to start him. Isaiah Crowell. So he's a guy that looked like he was in a great situation. Paul was out. He was going to get a majority of the carries in the last 2 weeks. He's been brutal. I'm not surprised. Look at the defense he played. He played the Bears and the Vikings. Both of those are top 5 in run defense. They've got great front sevens. Now he places Miami. The Miami defense gives up the 4th most points to running backs. He is their lead back with Powell out. Now, in some games, he has been shut down, but he also has 5 touchdowns on the year. He had one game he had over 20 yards rushing, another game over 100. I would start him as a lower running back 2 this week, and I would feel better about his matchup. I think he'll be good. Devontae Parker. So he finally had one good game. This guy came out of nowhere. It's hard to trust him. He hasn't had a reliable history. But he has the skill set. He's a former first-round pick, playing the Jets to give the 6th most points to wide receivers. I would take a chance on this guy this week. I think as a wide receiver 3, he'll be a decent play there. They've got to begin to look to the future, and he's got too much talent to ignore. So you could roll the dice with this guy. I call him a low-end wide receiver 3. You could start him, but better be in large leagues. Danny Amendola. Danny Amendola is consistent. He's not great. Start as a wide receiver 3 in PPRs. I would sit him in standard leagues. Then you got Curse, Robbie Anderson, Quincy Enunwa. He might be back this week. We don't know yet. We'll have to see. Now, he has a ankle sprain, high ankle sprain. Those are never good. Last week, he didn't get any practice in. He's going to have to get a couple practices this week. I'm thinking that he's trending towards not playing. But for me, it really doesn't matter. None of these guys are reliable. They're all beat up. They're all injured. And they're playing a Miami defense that is good against the pass. I would sit all of them. As far as tight ends go, you got Chris Herndon, tight end for the Jets. He's a rookie. Touchdown 3 weeks in a row. Wide receivers are banged up. You could start him if you need to, but keep your expectations lower. And then there's Mike Gesicki, the tight ends for Miami. Whichever one you want to talk about, sit them all. I would start kicker Sanders and Myers in this one. I would start Miami's defense. You could start the Jets defense in your daily fantasy lineup, but in regular leagues, they're not a great defense, so probably want to look elsewhere. Lions versus the Vikings. Look at Matthew Stafford. So if you look at the Vikings pass defense, it looks like they give a lot of points to quarterbacks. Wentz, Goff, and Josh Allen with his rushing touchdowns kind of elevated those numbers. The Vikings get the ninth most points to quarterbacks, but I think if we really look into the stats, we realize the Vikings defense is much better than that. They're not a great option against quarterbacks there. The last 3, they've only allowed 10 fantasy points per game. So that defense is getting better. They're figuring some things out, and now they're playing at home. So I think it's going to be hard on Stafford, who now lost Golden Tate. So I think all those things are concerning. I think for a lot of you, Stafford's the guy that you made to look at, though, because of the bye weeks. With that said, Stafford had a bad week 1, but since then he's been really good. Since then he's had 13 touchdown passes, only 2 interceptions. Now last season versus the Vikings, he really struggled. So I think what happened, you look at, he's still got Golladay there, he's still got Jones, he's got Kerryon Johnson, who's been developing really nice as a pass-catching option there. I think they're going to need to move the ball. I think they need to score points because I think Kirk Cousins is going to move the ball and score some points. I think a day of maybe 250 yards, 2 TDs, and interceptions, what you'll see from Matthew Stafford. Not great, but decent. Look at Kirk Cousins. He's averaging over 300 passing yards per game. He's got 16 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions. Playing at home, start Kirk Cousins, and you'll be good there. Say LeGarrette Blount, he's touchdown dependent. He's not playing well. He's got no value. The only thing that would give him value is Kerryon Johnson were to go down for the year with an injury. Then there's Kerryon Johnson playing Minnesota. Now, Minnesota gives up the 9th fewest points to running backs, but Johnson's playing very well, and he's a clear-cut number 1 back there. Now, last week his carries dropped based on game flow. They fell behind a little bit there. But he showed how versatile he is in the last game when he had 6 catches for 69 yards. So this is a guy that you need to start as a running back too. Then there's Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray plays the Lions, who give these 6 most points to running backs. Everything reports would seem to indicate that Dalvin Cook is going to be sat. They're going to keep him through the bye week, and he'll, if everything goes well, come back then. So after a sluggish start, Latavius Murray has really picked it up. He's had 3 good games in a row. And with Cook most likely out, I would start him as a healthy running back 2 play. Said Dalvin Cook, like we mentioned. Marvin Jones. Minnesota's allowing the 3rd fewest points to wide receivers. Tate being gone is a huge boost for him because he's going to get more targets. He's got a tough matchup. And with Cousins, he's got a tough matchup. He may see a little bit of Xavier Rhodes, some other guys there that'd be concerning. But Kirk Cousins throwing the ball, I think that this offense is going to have to throw the ball 30 to 35 times. He's going to get some of those targets. So I would start him as a low-end wide receiver 3. Now, last year he actually did have a big game versus Minnesota. He had 6 catches, 109 yards, and 2 TDs. And so he's a guy that I would start as a wide receiver 3. I don't think it's a great matchup, but I think it's a decent play. And there's Kenny Golladay. He's another one that gets a huge boost with Tate being gone there. He's going to see an increase in targets. Now, last 2 games he's been quiet, but some of those targets of Tate's are going to go to his, and for that reason, I would feel comfortable starting him as a wide receiver 3. Got Adam Thielen. He's got a chance to break Calvin Johnson's record this week. 8 consecutive games over 100 yards playing the Lions. Now, the Lions allow the 7th most points to wide receivers. Adam Thielen is a must-start. Nobody's slowed him down at all, so I think that's a solid play there. He's a wide receiver 1, obviously, and there's Stephon Diggs. He's had 4 great games and 4 really bad games. So what are you going to get with Stefon Diggs? You don't know. In some ways, it's going to be a tougher matchup for him, but he's too talented to sit. So I would start Stefon Diggs as a wide receiver 3. As far as tight ends go, there's Kyle Rudolph. Detroit allows a lot of points to tight ends. But I look at him, I think that Kyle Rudolph is very overrated. We said that in the preseason. I know some didn't agree with it. He's only averaging 40 yards per game with 4 catches per game and 2 touchdowns for the year. Personally, I'd try to find better options than starting Kyle Rudolph. As far as Lions tight ends go, I would sit them. Start Bailey and Prater in this one. Sit Detroit. You could start Minnesota, but I would say that they're not a top defensive play this week. Let's look at the Falcons and the Redskins. The Skins are allowing the 10th most points to quarterbacks, so regarding Matt Ryan. Okay, so Matt Ryan had a disappointing year last year, following up an MVP season there. So what was the biggest reason? What was the change there between the 2 years? I think the biggest thing is where that defense was. That was a huge effect on how much he had to throw the ball. In 2016, when he won the MVP, the Falcons defense ranked 27th in the NFL, allowing 25.4 points per game. In 2017, that defense improved greatly, allowing the 8th least amount of points. So early in this year, they've lost some key defenders. I think 3 to 4 key defenders are out for the year. We're not just talking about some bench players. We're talking about some key stars that they lost there. Since then, the last 5 games, they're allowing 34 points per game. That the Atlanta defense is brutal. They are bad. And that's forcing Matt Ryan to have to throw a lot. Also, another reason why he has to throw the ball a lot is Freeman is on IR. Coleman hasn't ran well, and they're playing Washington. The Washington's run defense, they're really impregnable against the run. They're very hard to run against. They're only allowing 80 total rushing yards per game. So basically, this offense will live and die in Ryan's arms, so you need to start him. Then there's Alex Smith. So we talked about how Atlanta lost some key defenders, and they're allowing 34 points per game in the last 5 games, and they're allowing the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. So now, Chris Thompson came back last week. He did hurt his ribs now, so he got a rib injury. We don't know if he's going to play. That makes him questionable, but Crowder could be back. This is a guy that you're going to have to stream simply because of buys, injuries, things like that. He's got a good matchup. I think Alex Smith is a decent play this week there. A guy that you can start. He's got a safe floor but a lower ceiling. And as far as running backs go, let's look at Adrian Peterson. Currently, this guy is 5th among all NFL running backs in yards. Playing Atlanta, who's allowing the 2nd most points to running backs. So he's been playing great. He's got a great matchup. You need to start Adrian Peterson. I'm going to go out and say it. I was wrong about this guy. He's really struggled the last few years. He had some good games against some very bad run defenses, but struggled against good run defenses. So it looked like this guy was at the end of his career and he didn't have much gas in his tank. But he's shown me otherwise. He's a guy that you can play. He's playing really well. I'm happy for him. Start him. And then there's Chris Thompson. He's a PPR stud. He's their best weapon in the passing game. You can start as a running back 2 or flex in PPR leagues. Peterson's recent play kind of devalues him in standard leagues. With that said, you need to monitor Chris because he's got that rib injury. There's Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman playing Washington. Now, Washington's riding 3 games in a row where they played really good on defense, allowing the 10th fewest points to running backs. Almost all those points to running backs have been through the air, not on the ground. Most rushing yards against them by a running back has been 61. As a team, they only allow 80 per game. Now, add to that right now, Tevin Coleman's career worst 3.8 yards per carry. I would sit him in standard leagues. You could start as a flex in PPR leagues over 14 teams. Ito Smith. Some of you were talking about Ito Smith. Yes, he had a TD 3 weeks in a row. But if you look at the last 3 weeks, his yards per carry and production have dropped. He's really a touchdown-dependent running back at this point. Sit him against this defense. As far as wide receivers go, you got Mohamed Sanu. The Redskins defense played very well, and they added Clinton Dix. That's only going to help that defense there. I would sit him. He's a wide receiver 4. I have Julio Jones. Started Julio Jones as a wide receiver 1. He's having a great year in terms of yards and catches. Just haven't found the end zone, but that's kind of been his MO in his career. He doesn't get in the end zone a lot, but you need to start him. And then there's Calvin Ridley. So for me, Calvin Ridley is what I would call a bubble wide receiver 3 or 4 based on your league size. To me, I put him ahead of Mohamed Sanu slightly. And so your league size and scoring will determine if you should start or sit him. Let us know kind of some of those things. We can give you more specifics if you want to know whether you should start him. Let's look at wide receiver Richardson of Washington. He's been their best wide receiver, but that doesn't say a whole lot. Their wide receivers have not been productive. But they are playing the Falcons that are allowing the 3rd most points to wide receivers. So I think you could start him as a wide receiver 3. And then there's Jamison Crowder. He might be back in this game, and if he is, I would play him. You need to watch the injury report there, but start him as a wide receiver 3 in DPPR leagues. He's got a great matchup here. As far as tight ends go, Austin Hooper. You need to start this guy, but don't let 2 games deceive you. He's not a top tight end. He's a quality play. Those 2 games that he had huge were against very, very bad defenses in terms of the fact that they allow a lot of points to tight ends. I think he's a quality play. He's not a great tight end. Then there's Jordan Reed. The Falcons defense is bad. We mentioned that already. But against tight ends, they're actually tougher. That's the one area where the Falcons play well. They tend to shut down tight ends. Reed is a clear-cut starter there, and because of this position, tight ends is very thin. A lot of you are going to have to start with no better options, but he's not a top 10 play this week. The Falcons kicker, Brian, is hurt. Whether he's going to play or not play, really don't know for sure. If he plays, you could start him. If it's Tavecchio, I would sit Tavecchio. And then I would sit the Falcons. And the Redskins defense could be, sit the Falcons defense. The Redskins defense can be started as a low-end play. Currently, right now, the Redskins, a lot of people don't know this, are 4th in fantasy points on defense. So that's they're decent play there. But they are playing Matt Ryan. I think Matt Ryan will put some points on the board there. So start him as a low-end play. Let's look at the Panthers versus the Buccaneers. Cam Newton playing Tampa Bay, allowing the most points to quarterbacks. They're allowing 33.3 points per game. This defense is bad. They're bad against quarterbacks. They're just bad everywhere. Cam Newton's got a huge game. Start him. Then there's Ryan Fitzpatrick, got the start this week. He's averaging 25 points per game in most leagues, only second to Pat Mahomes. Now, Carolina's kind of middle of the road in terms of points allowed to quarterbacks. So you need to start him. Why? Why should you start Fitzpatrick? Well, the Bucs defense is bad. They're the worst in the NFL. Cam's going to put up good points in this game, and Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to have to throw probably 40 to 45 times just to keep him in there, and he has good weapons to throw to, so start him. As far as running backs go, you got Peyton Barber. Ronald Jones left the game hurt, going to miss a couple weeks. That's good news for Peyton Barber because that means he's just going to have more carries. There was kind of some thought there, like, would they give the rookie an opportunity, looking to the future, give him a shot? Well, now that's not an issue. Barber's going to be their go-to guy. 2 of the last 3 games, he's been very good, but it's been against weaker run defenses. Now he faces the Panthers that allow the 8th fewest points to running backs. So he's a low-end volume play as a running back 3. You can play him. It's better that you don't. Then you got Christian McCaffrey playing Tampa Bay, allows the 10th most points to running backs. They're the worst defense in the NFL. Start as a running back 1. He's a top-tier play this week. Look at the wide receivers. Devin Funchess playing Tampa Bay, allowing the 2nd most points to wide receivers. Worst defense in the NFL. Start as a wide receiver 2. Normally, I'd say he falls in wide receiver 3 or 4, but this week I say he's a wide receiver 2. Then you got DJ Moore. DJ Moore is trending upwards. Each week his targets have been going up. His production's been going up. Start him as a wide receiver 2. I like more in this one. Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a wide receiver 1 stud. Start him. You get Deshaun Jackson. I would start him as a wide receiver 3. They're going to be playing from behind. His targets will be up. And so you'll also look at it. Him and Fitzpatrick really showed rapport there. I would start him. And then Chris Godwin is a wide receiver 4. Jackson, I think, is ahead of him. And it's pushing his value down there. As far as tight ends go, Sid Barrett. Howard, you need to start him. The Panthers allow the most points to tight ends, and he's been very good this year. So O.J. Howard is a must play this week. And that's Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen looks like he's healthy, looks like he's healed. Playing Tampa Bay, that allows the 4th most points to tight ends. The veteran looks like he's a good play this week. Start Cano, I'd sit Tampa Bay's kicker. You could start the Panthers defense. You need to sit Tampa Bay's defense in this one. Let's look at the Steelers and the Ravens. Let's look at Ben Roethlisberger. So he broke his pinky finger, I think they said today, but it says non-throwing hand, so he will play and he will be fine. He's playing the Ravens, allow the 4th fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, earlier this year, he was playing the Ravens in Pittsburgh. He had 274 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 pick. It's a scary play for him now playing in Baltimore against a good defense, but he's too good with too many good weapons. So he's a guy that you're going to play, but you're going to play with low expectations this week. I think another thing that's going to hurt him a little bit is the Steelers really lean a lot on Connor. James Conner's been really good. Le'Veon Bell may be back this week. Doesn't matter. They're going to get a heavy dose of, I think, both those backs. As far as Joe Flacco goes, Joe Flacco's playing Pittsburgh, allowing the 4th most points to quarterbacks. Last time facing the Steelers in Pittsburgh, he had 300-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. Now he's playing at home. Now, it looks like a great matchup, and I think it is. I think Joe Flacco is somebody that a lot of you are going to need to play out there. But the Steelers' defense is playing better. If you look at the first 4 games this year, in terms of fantasy points, they allowed 32.44 points per game to quarterbacks. The last 3, they're allowing 15.8 points. So I think I would start Joe Flacco, but I wouldn't expect a huge day from him. 250 yards, a couple TDs, 275 yards, maybe a couple TDs, something like that. Let's look at running back Le'Veon Bell. If he's back, I don't know if he's going to be back. Now, if he's back, he's going to have to get back into playing shape. Last year, he held out. In the first 2 games that he played, yards per carry were 3.2. He really struggled. Well, he's going to have to get back into playing shape, and he's actually missed more time this year, so I think it's going to take a while. Then you add to that, James Conner's been great. And so I don't think the team's going to rush to get him back in there. If he comes back, I would not start him this week. I would sit him. He needs to have a week back. We need to see what's going to happen there. As far as James Conner goes, if Bell does come back, I would play and I would start him as a running back 2. If Bell is out, start Conner as a running back 1. Even against a tough matchup, he's too good to not play. As far as Alec Collins goes, they stuck with him in spite of the fact he's had a couple fumbles this year. He's simply a better running back than Javarius Allen. And so he's playing a Steelers defense that is tough against the run, the 4th fewest points to running backs there. He can be started in standard leagues, but I would sit him in PPR leagues. Once again, Collins, you could start him in standards. I would sit in PPRs. Javarius Allen only has value in PPR leagues. I think he's going to have an expanded role against the Steelers there. So as a flex play in PPRs, you could start, but nothing else. Ty Montgomery's there now, but I would sit him. There's no reason to start him. There's a lot of reasons why I wouldn't play him this week. As far as wide receivers go, you got John Brown for Baltimore. Playing the Steelers, allowed the 7th most points to wide receivers. Started as a wide receiver 2. Michael Crabtree, also the same great matchup, started as a wide receiver 3. Then you have Juju Smith-Schuster. The Ravens are tough against wide receivers. The 4th fewest points allowed to wide receivers. And so for me, in that reason, I would drop Juju Smith-Schuster to a wide receiver 3 this week. You got to play him, but I would lower his value. And then Antonio Brown, doesn't matter. He's a wide receiver 1 every week. Doesn't matter who he plays. As far as tight ends go, you got Vance McDonald. You take away one big game that he's had there. He's been serviceable, but he hasn't been great. He's outside the top 10 to 12 this week as a guy you can start, but not a great play. I would sit Jesse James. Then you look at the tight ends for the Ravens. I would sit all them. I would start Tucker. I would sit Boswell as kickers. The Ravens are good, but I would probably sit them along with Pittsburgh this week. Let's look at the Texans versus the Broncos. Let's look at Deshaun Watson. Last week he had a 5-touchdown explosion last Thursday night. Now he plays Denver. Denver is allowing the 7th fewest points to quarterbacks. And that Denver defense is beginning to figure things out. Bradley Chubb has had 5.5 sacks the last 3 games. You add him with Miller, that front 7 can get a lot of pressure. They're going to make things difficult. It's going to get scary for some teams playing them. Now, if you take away Pat Mahomes' 2 games versus that defense, Pat Mahomes has been unstoppable. You take those 2 games away, you look at they have shut down or slowed down quarterbacks in the other 5 games that they have faced. This game is in Denver, so there's a lot of reason not to like this play for Watson. Fuller's out for the year. Kiki QD might miss the game. They're going to have Thomas there now, but I wonder, is he going to know the playbook? How much action is he going to see? It's hard to say. I think another concern I have also for starting Watson this one is the Texans defense is also playing well right now. And so between the Broncos and the Texans defense playing well, this could be a lower scoring game, less of a need to throw the ball there. You've seen his yards dip. The positive side of Watson is this. Looks like he's getting healthier again. He was pretty banged up there last game. He ran a few times, looked healthy. With 6 teams on a bye, you're going to have to play this guy, obviously. But I don't see a big game in this one. And then Case Keenum. So you look at Tom Brady and Andrew Luck had nice games versus them. But other than that, they have shut down a lot of quarterbacks. The Texans have done that. J.J. Watt is hot again. He looks like a Watt of old. In 4 games this year, Case Keenum has only had 1 touchdown pass total in 4 games. And those were against defenses that are weaker like Oakland and Kansas City. So I think sitting Case Keenum is preferred this week. Let's look at Lamar Miller. Denver is tough against the pass, but what happens often that Denver defense is they're aggressive, they over-pursue, and that means they actually allow a lot of yards on the ground. The 9th most points to running backs. So you look at Lamar Miller. After a miserable start, he's rebounded with 2 very good games, totaling 233 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns. I think they're going to want to run the ball a lot to take pressure off of the quarterback there, and so I like Miller this week. Then you got Philip Lindsay. Each week he looks better and better. He's become the clear number 1 back there. He also has good hands, very active in the passing game. Had great hands coming out of college. I think they're going to begin to use him more, actually. Started as a running back, too. As far as Freeman and Booker go, I would sit them both unless Lindsay were to get hurt and something were to happen, but otherwise I wouldn't start either one of those. As far as wide receivers go, you got Demaryius Thomas. He needs time to really build rapport, learn the playbook. I think he'll eventually become a solid wide receiver 3 play there, but not this week. This week he's a wide receiver 4. Kiki QT, he's questionable with a hamstring. Coach said that's too early in the week to know his status. He said out last Thursday, and he had 2 limited practices. So it suggests that's a possibility he could suit up this week. We'll have to watch that. We have to remember, though, even if he does play, he plays the Broncos D that is good. They allow, they're very low scoring. So I would say for me, I see him as a wide receiver 4. DeAndre Hopkins is a start as a wide receiver 1. Then Emmanuel Sanders, now Thomas is gone. That only solidifies his role as their best wide receiver, and this week he's a wide receiver 2 start. Cortland Sutton, I like his potential in this offense. I think this guy's going to be huge there. So I would start him as a wide receiver 3 in this matchup. As far as tight ends go, I would sit all tight ends in this one here. There's not enough consistent targets to trust that. I would start both kickers in this one, and I would start both defenses in this matchup. Look at the Chargers versus the Seahawks in this one. Look at Russell Wilson. So Chargers are allowing the 11th most points to quarterbacks. I think those numbers are actually deceiving if you look at it, because they haven't faced a lot of good quarterbacks. So let's look at some of the quarterbacks that they face. So on paper, they look like they're not giving up a ton of points per se to quarterbacks. They look decent there, but they faced Josh Allen, Beathard, Mayfield, and Marcus Mariota. The two go-to quarterbacks they faced, Goff and Mahomes, threw a total of 610 yards and 7 TDs in 2 games. So it would look like they're decent against quarterbacks, but I think they're vulnerable. You look at Russell Wilson's really trending upwards, and quietly he's having a nice year. 3 games in a row, he's had 3 touchdown passes. He had 1 game where he had 0 touchdown passes. Otherwise, the other 6, he's had 16 touchdown passes, only 4 interceptions. Start Russell Wilson this week. He's quietly under everybody's radar, but he's actually having a really good year. Then you got Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is also having a very quiet year. He has his best quarterback rating currently, right now. He's had 17 touchdown passes, only 3 interceptions. He's on pace for a career best 38 touchdown passes. Now, the Seattle defense in the offseason lost a lot of players on defense. Everybody thought they'd take a huge hit on that. But they're actually allowing the fewest points to quarterbacks. That defense, give them all the credit in the world. They're playing well. Now, that's another stat that's a little bit deceiving if you look at it. That defense has been better against quarterbacks, but it was against Prescott, Trubinsky, Rosen, and Carr. They only averaged 172 passing yards, the 1 TD pass per game, so it's not great. But if you look at Stafford, Keenum, and Goff versus them, they had 320 passing yards. So even though Seattle has allowed the fewest points to quarterbacks, I think some of that's matchup based. They played some very bad quarterbacks that kind of padded those stats. Against some quality quarterbacks, they were exposed. So I think that Phillip Rivers is a safe play this week. I think that's huge. As far as running backs go, you got Melvin Gordon. Besides Todd Gurley, he's averaging the most points in fantasy, more than any other running back besides Gurley. He's a must-start as a running back 1. Now, you have to watch his hamstring to make sure he's fine. Here's what they're saying currently. Coaching staff said Gordon will practice in some capacity on Wednesday. Taking the week off really helped Melvin Gordon get healthy. He ran well last week. We're going to do some things. We'll see where he's at, but hamstrings can be tricky, so you don't want to rush those things. So I think everything's trending towards Melvin Gordon playing, but we'll have to watch that. If he plays, you got to start this guy. So if he sits, let's look at Austin Eckler. Well, even if Gordon does play, this guy's had double-digit points in every game except for 1 in PPR scoring. So if Gordon plays, I would start him as a running back 3 or flex in PPRs. If Gordon sits, Eckler becomes a running back 2. He's a good play there. As far as Chris Carson goes, playing the Chargers, they're kind of the middle of the road in terms of points allowed to running backs out there. The new philosophy for Seattle is run hard, run often, run frequently, just keep running the ball over and over. And we're seeing that 3 of the last 4 games, he's over 100 yards rushing. He's a solid start at running back this week. As far as Mike Davis goes, he had increased carries with Penny. Now, Penny didn't get the ball last week. People are wondering what happened to Rashad Penny. He hurt his wrist. And so I think that they kept him on the sideline. They didn't need to use him. They rested him. So they went back to Mike Davis. He had a lot of carries, but he was pretty ineffective. And so I'd probably stay away from him. As far as wide receivers go, you got Doug Baldwin. When he has been quiet, Seattle's spreading the ball around to the receivers, and they're committed to running the ball first. And so you add that a knee injury that he's been dealing with. He's no longer a trustworthy wide receiver 1 or 2. He can be played as a wide receiver 3. You have Tyler Lockett. 6 TDs in 7 games. His yards and catches have been low, and they've been dropping with David Moore's performances and the fact that they're increasing their running attempts. He's a risky wide receiver 3 or 4 start who is touchdown dependent there. I like to look elsewhere. I hate just trusting on touchdowns for production. It really scares me. You have David Moore. David Moore is increasing his role in this offense, and he's looking more and more like somebody that's going to have fantasy value. But for me, he's not somebody I would trust. For me, he's a guy that's a wide receiver 4 that you pick up and you sit and you stash and you watch a couple more weeks to see if he can overtake more targets in that offense. Let's look at the wide receivers for San Diego there. I should say Los Angeles, man. Old habits die hard. Let's look at Los Angeles Chargers there, wide receivers. Tyrell Williams. So he's had 2 huge games, back-to-back games. This guy's been phenomenal. But in those games, he only had 4 targets each game. He's only averaged 3.85 targets for the entire year. He's a boomer bust play. Some of you will gamble on him. I'm the type that preferred not to. Some of you will gamble and start him as a wide receiver 3, and that's not a bad play per se, but I like to find more reliable options. I love target production that I can trust. This is a guy that can't rely on 50-yard touchdowns every week to be productive. And so He's okay. He has more value in standards. He has less value in PPR leagues. Then there's Mike Williams. He's a young first-round pick from last year. He's very talented, but not enough targets to trust. He's a wide receiver 4. And you have Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen last year had a huge year, but if you look at it, his numbers actually took off after Week 9. He's a good quality he's a good quality wide receiver out there. I would start him as a wide receiver 2. As far as tight ends go in this one here, I would sit all tight ends. I would start Janikowski, and I would sit the Chargers kicker. I would avoid starting either defense. Now, either defense, that's one I think is just best if you try to look elsewhere in this. Let's get the Rams and the Saints. Let's look at Jared Goff versus the Saints, allowing the second most points to quarterbacks. And I think he might get a huge boost. Cooper Kupp sounds like he might be back this week, and so that's huge for him. He's a very solid play. Now, the downside of Goff is the fact that Todd Gurley gets so many rushing touchdowns, but I think you're splitting hairs there. I think Jared Goff is a very good play and a great matchup. Drew Brees. Playing the Rams, allowing the fourth fewest points to quarterbacks, but it's really hard to sit Drew Brees, right? Because he's Drew Brees, and it's a tough week with 6 teams on a bye. So I think you need to start him, but lower your expectations. I think not only is it a tougher matchup, but what else concerns I have for Drew Brees is the presence of Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. And so we saw that last year. He had a very good last year, Drew Brees did, but those guys with the rushing touchdowns decrease his passing touchdowns. What I do see happening in this game, though, is I see Jared Goff moving the ball, scoring a fair amount of points, and forcing Drew Brees to have to throw. He was quiet against the Vikings, but the reason why is game flow. They got out ahead there in the third quarter, and I think they started to really control the clock. They were more methodical. And so I think he's a decent start this week, Drew Brees, but not a great start. Start Todd Gurley. He's having one of the best running back seasons of all time, and so start him. Mark Ingram. So Mark Ingram has good hands, but they've been increasing Alvin Kamara's role in the passing game and slightly decreasing his role. I think he's got more value in standard leagues. I would start as a running back 3 or flex. He's not a tier 1 running back this year like he was last year, so I'd be careful there. Alvin Kamara, start him, of course. A lot of people were worried after that week when Ingram came back, had all those carries, and they sat him. And they sat him because, one, they had a big lead, and they're resting a guy that had a majority of the carries and touches the first 4 weeks. Everybody was panicking. People are asking me, should we trade this guy? Should we get rid of him? Like, no, Alvin Kamara is going to be fine. He showed us this guy's going to be great. He's by far their best running back. Start him. As far as wide receivers go, you have Brandon Cooks. Playing the Rams, giving up the most points to wide receivers. Now, if Kupp returns and plays this game, I would say Cook, Woods, and Kupp become wide receiver 3s. If it turns out that Cooper Kupp misses another game, I would say Cooks and Woods become wide receiver 2s. So that's where they land, but they all need to be started in this one. Michael Thomas is a wide receiver 1 stud. Now, the Rams are tough on receivers, the 6 fewest points, but I think this game is going to be higher scoring. I think they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. I like Michael Thomas. And you have Traquan Smith and Cameron Meredith. This is another one where I like Traquan. I think he's got talent. Even Cameron Meredith, they look good at times, but they're very hit or miss. There's so many other weapons they can use in that offense, so I would sit them both. As far as tight ends go, you have Benjamin Watson versus the Rams, 10th most points to tight ends. Last week he had 0 points. I heard a lot of owners, and then remind us why in drafts it's good to take a good quality tight end early, because these guys that even in great matchups, you can't trust them. I would sit the Rams tight ends. I would start Lutz and Greg Zuerlein, and I would sit both defenses. Should be a fun game here, right? Packers, Patriots. Look at Tom Brady. Tom has played very well. He's getting his weapons back now. You got Gordon there, Edelman, a healthy Gronk. This game should be a shootout. So I love Tom Brady in this one. Then there's Aaron Rodgers playing the Patriots, giving up the 8th most points to quarterbacks. This is a no-brainer. Start Aaron Rodgers. As far as Aaron Jones go, we've been saying it for quite a while. This guy's got a lot of talent. They've got to give him the ball more. They finally did. It's starting to pay dividends. I also like the fact that Ty Montgomery's gone. The few carries that he had will go to either Williams. It should go to Jones. And so last week he had 12 carries, 86 yards, and a touchdown. Playing New England gives up the 14th most points to running backs. I would start him as a running back 2. I would sit Jamal Williams. In his usually disappointing game, he goes out with 4 carries for 9 yards. I don't care how good he is in pass protection. The Packers are killing themselves when he's on the field as much as he is. Jones needs to be out there more often. James White. It's the wide receiver they list as a running back, right? This guy is great. You need to start him. He's solid. He is a solid running back 1-2 in PPR leagues. I would say in standards, he probably falls to a running back 2/3, depending on your league size and scoring system. Sony Michel. Boy, did they miss him last game. They just could not run the ball. They need him to come back. We'll see. We'll have to monitor. If he plays, start him as a running back 2. Good play. We'll have to monitor the injury report and see how this week goes there. Wide receivers go. You got Josh Gordon. Last week, his numbers weren't great. He had 4 catches, 42 yards, but he had a tough matchup against cornerback White there. It's going to look better this week. I think he's going to free some things up. I think the targets will go up. I think that we can trust him as a wide receiver 3. As far as Julian Edelman goes, healthy amount of targets. He's averaging about 8 targets per game, which is a decent amount. He's had 2 touchdowns in 4 games. Start him as a wide receiver 2 in PPRs and standards. He's a wide receiver 3. And then you have Devontae Adams. Start him as a wide receiver 1. He's a stud. Other than Adam Thielen, there's no one hotter right now in the NFL than Devontae Adams. So you look at Cobb. And so Cobb, I would start as a wide receiver 3 in PPRs. I would sit Cobb in standards. Then you got Allison, you got Marquez, Scantling, Valdez. Where do those guys land with that? Well, there's a lot of other guys there that, quite honestly, we just simply don't know. The guy who's training up right now is Marquez, Scantling, Valdez, who's training up and looking better and better. But Allison looked pretty good for a while there too. In fact, a lot of you got burnt, and we kind of cautioned you even going into last week not to trust him. And so with both of those guys, I just need to see how this is going to shake out. The best thing that could happen for them is Cobb to go down for the year or to continue to perform badly. But right now, I don't trust them. I would sit them. Start both tight ends, Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski. Start them at a position that's very thin. I would start Gostkowski and Crosby, and I would sit both defenses in this one. Our final game, let's get to the Titans and the Cowboys. So Marcus Mariota, playing the Dallas Cowboys, gave him the 10th fewest points to quarterbacks. And now you add to that, Marcus Mariota has really struggled this year. -1 game, okay? Other 5 games, he's averaging 137 passing yards. I would strongly advise sitting him. Then you have Dak Prescott. He's playing Tennessee. It gives up the 8th fewest points to quarterbacks. The Titans' defense is pretty good. That's the strength of their team there. Now, Dak Prescott has played better. He's had 2 rushing touchdowns recently. He does have Amari Cooper there, but we don't know exactly what that report is going to look like, how they're going to be. Don't trust him at this point. I would advise sitting him. That Dallas offense, even though it's shown some life at times, is still far out of water yet, playing a solid Titans defense, so sit him. As far as running backs go, Ezekiel Elliott, despite the offensive struggles, he's still having a really good season. Start him. Then Deion Lewis. We said it all summer long. Stay away from Derrick Henry. We're right. 3.3 yards per carry have been brutal. I don't expect he's going to turn it around. He might have a couple decent games. There's just a lot of stuff analytics-wise that we shared sabermetrics before the season to pointing to why this guy is struggling there. Stay away. That leaves the one back that you should look at there is Deion Lewis. Now, he's had 2 games this year where he's rushed the ball well. One game, week 1, he had 16 carries, 75 yards. Last week, he had 13 carries last week that he played. 13 carries, 91 yards for 7.0 yards per carry. He also had 6 catches for 64 yards. But the reason why I like Deion Lewis, why I think you can trust him, is his hands. He's very active in the passing game. 20 catches the last 4 weeks and 29 on the year, on pace for 66 catches. In fact, last season he had the best catch rate among all running backs. So I like him there. Sit Derrick Henry. As far as wide receivers, you have Corey Davis playing Dallas, allow these 7th fewest points to quarterbacks. You add to that Mariota struggles. You take away 1 good game. Davis has struggled there. He's a wide receiver 4 sit. Tajay Sharp, same for the same reasons above. He's had 1 good game. Dallas's defense is good. Marcus Mariota is playing bad. I would sit Sharp. There's Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's had 2 really good games this year, and he had 4 terrible games. Though I think he's going to have a little resurgence here. I think his career is going to get better and turn it around for Dallas. It's a huge boost playing for Dak Prescott, but they need to build rapport, and we need to see exactly how he does in that offense there. I would sit him. I also sit Michael Gallup. Titans give up the 10th most points to wide receivers, but there's a lot of question marks there, so I would sit them. Look at Cole Beasley. Now, he's probably the one wide receiver that I would probably start. If you look at one game, he had 7 catches, another game with 9 catches, another game with 7 catches. He's had back-to-back good games. He can be started in PPR leagues only as a wide receiver 3. Sit Allen Hurns. As far as tight ends go, I'd really sit all the tight ends in this one. I would start both kickers in this game, and I would start both defenses, though I think Dallas is the better play. So that's a lot of information. I wish I had time to go deeper, but this video would be 2 hours long. So if you want better information, deeper information of why we ranked them, where we did, why we gave the advice to start, sit, etc., put something on the bottom. Do us a favor. Help us to continue to grow the site. And you can do that by liking, commenting, sharing the videos. As resources come in, we're going to put it back into our production quality for you guys to give you better information and help you to be more competitive in your leagues. Thank you for joining me in our Start Sit video. God bless and have a good night.